I have 10 points I want to make in this lecture, and it may have to go into two parts as well, but we'll see how it goes. You've been reading this week about General Convention and about the possibility of reorganizing General Convention in the Episcopal Church. It's become unwieldy and very expensive. General Convention happens every 3 years. It happens in different places. It's distant. It seems to have a life of its own. It's almost like the Congress of the United States. It goes about its legislative processes, which are convoluted and hemmed in by all sorts of parliamentary procedures, and in large part the work of the General Convention seems utterly detached from congregational life. That's a first point, and I'll be interested to hear your feedback from your reading about the future of the General Convention in the Episcopal Church. Having said that about General Convention, my second point has to do with seminaries, and one can say something similar about the seminaries in the Episcopal Church and about theological education, broadly speaking, within the United States. Seminaries have become professional schools that grant a variety of professional degrees. They're graduate schools, and they function like institutions of higher education. In doing so, they too are out of touch for the most part with congregations and congregational life. They're insular. Their faculty make curricular decisions that seem to be dictated more by the concerns of the faculty's involvement with the American Academy of Religion, or with the Society of Biblical Literature, or with the American Society of Christian Ethics than they do make those curricular decisions in dialogue with congregations and dioceses throughout the church. And to a very real sense then, congregations and dioceses send their seminarians off to seminary in hopes to receive a product back, a product that is shaped and stamped by the seminary with very little input from the congregation. There is very little dialogue that goes back and forth between the seminary and the diocese and the congregations. And I think that explains why then congregations have thought it really unnecessary to provide financial support for seminaries, or dioceses for that matter, to support seminaries as a part, as a regular budget line in their annual financial planning. It's little wonder then that many seminaries in the Episcopal Church have fallen on hard times. There seems to be little reason to invest in a theological education in an institution that seems quite remote, that seems to be an institution of higher education that has a life and an institutional identity all its own. You read in Ferguson's essay, but you also read it in the essay written by the president of the Episcopal Divinity School about the notion of apprenticeship between seminaries and parishes. And my hope is that in the future we might revivify this idea of apprenticeship between seminaries and congregations. Apprenticeship not simply understood as field education, but really something quite a bit more substantial. I think of my own field education experience at Yale Divinity School. I was an Episcopal layman at Yale Divinity School, but I was not in the Holy Orders process. I was not in the ordination process. And so there really wasn't a place for me to take up a space, if you will, in Episcopal parish, because I wasn't planning to be ordained. And so I found that my field placement was in a congregational parish. It was a great congregation in New Britain, Connecticut, a historic congregational church that had had a very important role in New England Congregationalism, but really nothing to do with my future role as a layman in the Episcopal Church. I think I did good work there. I think I contributed to the life of that church in New Britain, Connecticut. But it really wasn't an experience that formed me as a layman in the Episcopal Church. What I have in mind in terms of an apprenticeship is something that would be similar to what used to be thought of as a curacy. And you'll remember in the old days, one read for Holy Orders, usually while one was doing a Master of Arts degree. One was given a bibliography by the diocese that one would work through and be examined on. But then you would spend a year as a curate in a parish under the tutelage or guidance of the local parish priest. Well, as curacies developed in the United States, they're generally thought of as a first ministerial appointment. So not field education, but as a full-time ministerial appointment, usually for only 3 years at the most, a paid curacy, again where you would be under the tutorage of a vicar or a rector. But as our essays this week have noted, that's become very expensive, and parishes simply can't afford that. They can hardly afford one priest, let alone a priest who is there as a curate. And yet it seems to me that that kind of apprenticeship, a revivifying of curacy, could be a very important boon to the Church. But we need to rethink of it. We need to rethink of its organization and structure. Something I have in mind is the possibility of maybe having 2 years of formal coursework in a seminary, and then a 3rd year where the student is still technically a seminarian, but in a parish, a full year in a parish where the parish perhaps pays the tuition of the seminarian and provides housing and maybe a modest stipend, but it's primarily of relieving that tuition burden, which would be a boon to the seminaries. But that the curriculum for that 3rd year would be rather more flexible and worked out in negotiation with how the parish sees the curate as needing to be formed during that 3rd year, so that it would be kind of independent study work being shaped both by the seminary and by the parish. I think that could be a really interesting approach to a 3rd year of seminary education. I'm also thinking then of how that might affect the way in which we think the transitional diaconate. And I see my clock is running toward 10 minutes, so I better close here and take that up in a part 2.